I was thinking to tell you how I met the next speaker, and I found I don't recall exactly how that happened. Very likely working on some project at the Seven Ray Institute. Since whenever that was, we have been together completing numerous mundane jobs and talking about everything under the sun, some beyond the sun, truth be told. One bit of work we did together that was fun, scary for me, and energizing was speaking to small groups of folks new to the teachings. This touches the center of what is Kathy's work, I think. That is to modify, qualify, and adapt the ageless wisdom for today. A Planetary Awakening, which I forgot to bring up, but it's in the bookstore, her wonderful book, written for beginners, useful to non-beginners, is dedicated thus, for a new generation of seekers. She is a quiet, sure underpinning to my life, my friend, Kathy Newburn.
Thank you, Eva. Can you hear me? Is the mic on? Okay. Thank you, Eva. And I could say the same for you, for all of your quiet support of all the people and helping to make this conference happen, and Helena, too. I just wanted to say a note of gratitude for these unsung heroes and heroines, I guess, behind this conference. This has been a very fourth-way experience for me to prepare this little talk. And as the esoteric astrologers helped me over the years to understand that perhaps I don't really even have any fourth ray in this lifetime. But we all know that we inherit a lot of qualities from the past. And so we're all a product not only of our astrological charts, our ray makeup in this lifetime, but we're also the product of many, many long series of incarnations. We're also the product of our national identity, you know. The characteristics of an American are quite different from that of a Russian or a British person, you know. So we all have many, many factors that contribute towards us. But when thinking about the fourth ray and my own relationship to it, I came across a very revealing personal history, which I hesitate to reveal, but after Heidi paved the way and Ocean followed, I thought maybe it's a time to let it all hang out, you know, and reveal the hidden mysteries of ourselves. So, this has a little story behind it, and it's not esoteric at all. So, the explanation is, the other influence in our lives, I think, comes in vitro, right? We're a product of what our mother was dealing with or going through when we were inside of her. And my mother has 6 planets in Capricorn, so she has a lot of intensity, but it's all beneath the surface. So she liked to read highly romantic novels as a way of tuning into something really deep and romantic. And so when she was, when I was inside of her, she was reading perhaps the most romantic and tragic of all of the novels, Wuthering Heights. And if you don't know the story, I'll just run through it very briefly. It's a tragic tale of obsession, a tragic tale of Scorpio, a love triangle, you know, very dramatic. And I was named after this Kathy, you see. So I've tried to change my name a number of times to get away from this influence of this curse, of the Kathy Heathcliff curse. But I have not been able to change the name nor successfully get away from the curse. But anyway, So in the nature of revealing it all, I thought I could play you a dramatic clip from the movie. So let's go here. And when there's no words, but when you see their mouths moving, you know that he's saying Kathy, and she's saying Heathcliff. That was Kathy. I don't know. So, just suffice it to say, we all have a lot, a lot to deal with, a lot to overcome, and perhaps our mother's influence is really strongly upon us. But back to serious things. We esotericists like to be very serious. The title of this talk is The Lotus of Living Beauty. And there has been a lot of talk about lotuses this weekend. For those of you who might be new to the Ageless Wisdom teachings, simply put, I guess we could say that we are all lotuses in various stages of unfoldment. Nicholas gave a talk related to this, supposedly depending upon not just our evolutionary status, we don't all unfold evenly. Eleanor also probably has a lot of thinking about this as well. We all, because of our long series of past lives, our work that we've done, we may have unfolded the love petals in a previous incarnation, and then in this incarnation are therefore working on unfolding the mental aspects of ourselves, or vice versa, And we're all beautiful lotuses on the inner planes. But this particular phrase, the lotus of living beauty, comes from the Discipleship and New Age books in a letter to Foster Bailey. He was said to be someone of a first-ray soul, and first-ray people tend to have difficulty visualizing. And so the Tibetan tried to lighten him up a little, he was sort of serious man, and he asked him to do a brief but potent visualization related to his service work. And he said, just take 10 minutes each day. And Foster had many different responsibilities in the Lucis Trust. He was the husband of Alice Bailey, if you don't know. He worked very much behind the scenes. He had to do a lot of the dirty work in the Lucis Trust. And so the Tibetan wanted him to cultivate joy, cultivate beauty in his life. And so he gave him a visualization, 10 minutes, because Foster didn't really like to meditate. 10 minutes of visualizing the various aspects of his service work as lotuses of living beauty. And he asked him to link each of these lotuses, one with the other, through a radiant strand of fiery energy. And so I think maybe we can all use that in our lives, because we all seem to be living on this third-ray planet of diversity, and we all have many skills. And so we can perhaps visualize them each as lotuses of living beauty, connected one with the other, and therefore serve to reveal the perhaps hidden aspects of our service work and bring it more fully to life. Because there are so many hidden treasures and beauty within ourselves, and our task through working with our soul is to come more fully into the ability to let these hidden aspects flower forth. Just as we note in the teachings, during World War II, London all of a sudden was witnessing the birth of beautiful flowers that were long repressed, long hidden beneath the earth, and with the bombing, all of these seeds were brought to the surface and flowered. And so I think it's the same in our own lives when we go through those difficult moments, those crises, wherein everything seems to be taken from us, and it seems like we have nothing left. And then later, after a period of time, we'll find new seeds have begun to come to flower within our lives. So that's the title of the talk. And it relates also on a more macrocosmic level, I think, to what many people this weekend, William Leader, for example, and others have been speaking about this time of great importance in our planetary life, which according to the ageless wisdom is, as we note, one of the most important times in the 21 million years of planetary history. This time is the time for which the masters of the wisdom have been preparing for all of these many millions of years. And why it's related to lotuses is because it's as if this is a time when the lotuses are opening, flowering, the human lotuses. We're all, as I said, at various stages in our unfoldment, but this is a collective time when there's said to be a second fecundation. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that word. This is a time of the second fecundation from the, I guess we could call the solar angels. I don't want to get into an explanation of what the solar angels are, because perhaps I don't even know myself, but suffice it to say they are great initiates, fully realized masters of the wisdom, who, as I understand it, have sacrificed themselves for us, to aid us. Each one of us has one of these fully initiated beings guiding us. And the first influx of energy from the solar angels occurred, we're told, during the ancient time of Lemuria, when the animal men of the day were impregnated by a spark of mind, and they became men. So that was the first fecundation, and we're told that was a most important time in our planetary history. But more importantly is what's occurring now. This, we're told, is the time that the solar angels, these great beings who are related to each one of us, are going to see the realization of their work. And this is the time of what we're called the second fecundation, the second inpouring of the light from these great beings to each one of us. And we're told that this inpouring will change ordinary human beings into spiritual beings. So this is the hope of this time. This is what's on the verge of manifestation. And how is this second fecundation, or inpouring of love from the solar angels, to occur? It is precisely through the creation of the Antakarana bridge. That's a fancy term. Inner bridge, I believe it means in Sanskrit, the inner bridge, the creation of the inner bridge. It's something that we are all in the process of doing, projecting those strands of lighted energy from the lower to the higher mind. We're told bridging a gap that exists in consciousness. So it's this gap that we're collectively bridging, and as we do so, the flowering occurs. And that's what's happening now. So every effort that we can make in our daily lives to bridge that gap through our meditative practice, through our service work, through our application to spiritual study, through our pondering, every effort along whatever line we make contributes to the construction of the planetary Antakarana bridge through which light and love and power can flow and bring about the transformations that are necessary to move our planet into the light. It's a collective group Antakarana. Well, this talk is supposed to be about simplicity as well. And this is not a simple quote, but through the application of the Antakarana bridge, perhaps we can begin to make some sense of these highly esoteric passages found in esoteric astrology. I will not present any others that are quite so intense, but because we are working under the influence of Taurus at this time, and Taurus, as we know, is ruled by the planet Venus, and I think the chapter on Taurus gets overlooked, that's my impression, because it's the last chapter of the Tibetan's explanation of the 12 zodiacal signs. It's at the end. We're preoccupied with the very important Vesak festival at this time, so we tend to, at least in my own experience, overlook this chapter. And this chapter is extremely deep, and this is one of those passages. Some of these ideas come from what's called the Old Commentary, a very, very ancient text that is not in publication. So I'll just read this, maybe just to seed our minds, but I know many of you here have pondered these things. These connotes in our minds, even if we have only a glimpse of occult truth, that which is mental, that which concerns final sublimation, that which deals with sex, and that which must work out into symbolic expression upon the physical plane. Those are the major concepts which enter our minds when Venus and Taurus are considered in unison. These factors of expression have ever been related to these two since the night of time, because they are essentially basic and eternally cosmic in their implications. Taurus is one of the signs which veils a certain divine mystery. For the sake of disciples in training, these four concepts have been briefly summed up in an archaic writing of great significance. This writing states, this is the part from the Old Commentary, the holy souls of mind embraced the two. They saw and understood. Thus was sex born, and thus the great mistake was made. The mind was outward turned. The form appears to view, and not the love. Out of the dark they cried aloud, the holy sons of mind. In pain they cried aloud. They inward looked and knew the error they had made, but knew not what to do. The Lord replied and gave to them the sign of resurrection. And then the Tibetan says, do you grasp the significance of this statement and its fundamental simplicity? Let me give you a hint. The earthly triplicity has been designated by astrologers as embodying the idea of plains, related to Taurus, of caves, related to Virgo, and of rock, Capricorn. It might be stated that these caves exist in the rocks, deep under the plains. I am speaking figuratively and symbolically. Out of the rocky cave the Christ emerged and worked again upon the plains of earth, and from that time the woman knew him not. Fear had no further hold upon him, for he had overcome it in the depths. Into the cave of initiation, the light of resurrection streams when a stone at the entrance is rolled away. From life in the flame to the death of the flame, deep in the rocky place, down in the crypts of the temple, the human being goes. But into that same place, the old life streams, bringing fresh life and liberation. Old things pass away, and the darkness becomes light. And then he goes on to speak of the essentially symbolic nature of sex, and how, as we work at sublimating this powerful energy, we can perhaps be able to live more free from the glamorous Maya and illusion of this world. And that was essentially the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, which, as the Tibetan says, eternally answer man's demand of why. They can be summarized as follows. The Buddha taught that misery and suffering are of man's own making, and that the focusing of human desire upon the undesirable, the ephemeral, and the material was the cause of all despair, all hatred, and competition, and the reason why man found himself living in the realm of death, the realm of physical living, which is the true death of the spirit. So Buddhism, the Buddha, should be a clue for the way out of our entrapment in this material world through adherence to the Noble Truths, or attempting to adhere to them in our daily lives. We've had a lot of interesting presentations this weekend that dealt with biography, and I've always been someone very, very attracted to the lives of other people. And so I just wanted to bring my own contributions of biography to the presentation here. And one of my great heroes has always been Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And I think he relates to this idea of simplicity, because he was a very complicated man. And I think complicated people are drawn to ideas of simplicity, to help them understand the complexities, to rise above them, and to enter into something that can help ease that inner complexity in which they live. And so Rousseau spent a lot of time walking. He just walked. And if you study the lives of many of the great artists in the past, they walked a lot. And I think today, in this world of TMI, too much information, it would do us all good to get out and walk a little and free ourselves from the third ray, overactivity, long-mind stimulation that is bombarding us from all sides. Because technology is great, but technology, like all things, has a higher and lower aspect. And when we're slaves to it, perhaps it becomes an instrument of the forces of materialism. And so perhaps to free ourselves from that, we could take a moment each day to leave our cell phones behind, to leave our computers behind, and to take a walk, and breathe, as Heidi said, breathe, just take a walk. And that's what Rousseau did quite often. And if you don't know who he was, I don't know a tremendous amount about him, even though he's a hero. He was from Geneva, French-speaking. As a child, his mother died at his birth. His father read to him from Plutarch's Lives, the lives of the great philosophers. So he grew up with those as his models. That's who he emulated from birth, the great philosophers. And he lived a very colorful life as a young man, very colorful, and so colorful that he had to write about his confessions in about 7 volumes because of his colorful life. But at the same time, he was a devout Catholic, so he had a lot of conflicts, But apart from all of it, he was a sincere seeker of truth. And on his road to Damascus, when he was 37 years old, he had an interesting experience. So I'll just read that from his own words. He was going to visit a friend of his who was imprisoned, because in those days in France, he did live in France most of his life, you couldn't just say what you wanted to and post it on a blog. You had to be pretty careful about what you said. And his friend Diderot was thrown into prison for speaking. So in the midst of his walk by himself through the woods, he read about an essay contest in a newspaper. They were asking people to write an essay as to whether the arts and sciences have contributed towards the elevation of human consciousness. And so he was thinking about this. Have the arts and sciences contributed to the elevation of human consciousness? He said, if anything ever resembled a sudden inspiration, it was the motion that was made in me as I read that, about this contest. He said, I felt dizzy, faint, overcome. At the moment of that reading, I saw another universe, and I became another man. Gasping for breath, he collapsed under a tree, leaping in agitation. Suddenly I felt my mind dazzled by 1,000 lights. Crowds of lively ideas presented themselves at once with a force and confusion that threw me into inexpressible turmoil. Oh, sir, if ever I could have written a quarter of what I saw and felt under that tree, with what clarity would I have revealed all the contradictions of our social system? With what force would I have exposed all the abuses of our institutions? With what simplicity would I have demonstrated that man is naturally good, and it is through these institutions alone that men have become bad? So that revelation under the tree turned Jean-Jacques Rousseau from a struggling musician into perhaps one of the greatest philosophers of all time, whose ideas ignited the French Revolution and the subsequent American Revolution. It was that raw moment, that spontaneous awakening that he had on his road to Damascus. So, I like to follow in his footsteps. I like to walk, especially at this time of year, when it's beautiful. And we can receive inspiration fleeting, perhaps, inspirations. So like Heidi, I think, said, bring your iPhone. You can bring it, but you don't listen to it. Just have it there to record any inspirations which might flow into your consciousness on these walks. Here are some of a few key points from your soul. Very simple. Man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains. I have always said and felt that true enjoyment cannot be described. Nature never deceives us. It is we who deceive ourselves. Those that are most slow in making a promise are the most faithful in the performance of it. You forget that the fruits belong to all and that the land belongs to no one. I have never believed that man's freedom consisted in doing what he wants, but rather in never doing what he does not want to do. I hate books. They only teach us to talk about things we know nothing about. These hours of solitude and meditation are the only ones in the day during which I am full myself and for myself, without diversion, without obstacle, and during which I can truly claim to be what nature willed. So, just to share another aspect of my life is where I walk in Central Park. This was after a beautiful snowstorm this winter. This is called Poets' Lane. And on this walk there are statues of all these great poets, many of whom I never heard of, but great English poets, Irish poets, Shakespeare, beautiful bronze statues. Most people don't pay any attention to them because they're listening to their cell phones, chatting away, living in this highly overstimulated time in which we all live. But then, past Poets' Lane, around the corner, is another poet of life. He doesn't have a name, but he always arrests my attention every day. He's quite handsome. That might have something to do with it. But from another perspective, when I look at him, what word jumps to mind is alignment. I don't know if my picture really captures it, but this man is aligned. He is a testimony. Here's another view of him. Maybe you get it more clearly there. He's not a poet. He's not famous. He never wrote a word. But he was in touch with the earth, his symbol. He was in touch with the earth. And so I think America has to get back to the foundations which the Native Americans held and lived. Yes, they were warring people on one side, but on another side, they had great reverence for the earth and for the simplicities of life. So perhaps I'll close with another quote from Chief Seattle, one of the wise Indian leaders, which I think about on my walk through Central Park in the middle of New York City. There is no quiet place in the white man's cities, no place to hear the unfurling of leaves in spring or the rustle of insects' wings. But perhaps it is because I am a savage and do not understand. The clatter only seems to insult the ears. And what is there to life if a man cannot hear the lonely cry of the whippoorwill or the arguments of the frogs around a pond at night? I am a red man and do not understand. The Indian prefers the soft sound of the wind darting over the face of a pond, and the smell of the wind itself, cleansed by a maiden-day rain, or scented with the pinyon tree. The air is precious to the red man, for all things share the same breath. The beast, the tree, the man, they all share the same breath. The white man does not seem to notice the air he breathes. Like a man dying, for many days he's numb to the stench. And if we sell you our land, we must keep it apart and sacred as a place where even the white man can go to take the wind that is sweetened by the meadow's flowers. So, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to share and encourage you all to take a walk.